Hello everyone, how's it going? Welcome back to Clockwork Kitchen. It's been a minute since we've had a chance to talk. I didn't post last week because allergies just got the better of me and I did not have it in me to put out a video, but I am back this week. And today we're going to talk about 10 ways that you can start to cook if you have no idea where to start. So if you're watching this into the future, it's currently April 2020, which means that we're still in the middle of this coronavirus pandemic. And a lot of states, including DC, although DC isn't a state, but that's a whole contentious issue, but DC has put out a stay-at-home order that is in effect until June 10th. So essentially, we have been told that we need to stay in our houses for another 2 months. And a friend of mine named Bob Sullivan, who's a really great journalist, put out an article recently. I'm gonna link it down below so that you can check it out. And he argues that we can look at this time as a way to develop new skills and new habits. So it got me thinking that a lot of people really struggle with making time for cooking. So if you've been wanting to learn how to cook, or if you know some of the basics but have been wanting to improve your cooking, I don't want to say that this is a great time because there is nothing great about this time, but it's not a bad time if you are stuck at home to then look at this as an opportunity to start learning how to cook. And even if you already know how to cook and feel pretty comfortable with it, you should still stick around. These are things that I turn to when I feel really lazy and just don't really want to cook. It's a really great way to have a refresher on some of the basics and some of the easy ways to approach cooking. Before we jump right in, I just want to encourage you to subscribe if you haven't already. Really helps to support my channel. It really does make a difference, and then you can be notified the next time I post. All right, without further ado, here are my 10 tips on how to start cooking when you don't know where to start. My first tip for learning how to cook is to find your lowest barrier of entry. So what does that mean? That means that when you're first learning how to cook, you don't need to cook something crazy and elaborate. When I was first teaching myself back in college, I would take boxed mac and cheese and make that, so boil the water and cook the pasta and make that like powdery, cheesy sauce. And then I would take frozen vegetables and saute those up on the stove, mix those up with the mac and cheese, have that as my meal, and call that a win. It's not something that I wrote home about and was like, Mom, guess what I made? But the purpose here is when you start small like that, you're really just developing the habit of making the time and the commitment to cook at home where it's not just throwing something in the microwave, that you're actually cooking something up on your stove or in your oven or any other way. Once you kind of develop that habit and really get into the muscle memory of making time to do that, then you can start to scale up and make things more difficult. And I still do this when I'm feeling kind of lazy at home. I have no qualms taking like a frozen scallion pancake, for example, from Trader Joe's, putting some sauce on it and throwing a fried egg on top and calling that my meal. Super, super simple, quick, takes like 5 minutes to put together, but when I'm feeling really lazy and don't want to cook at all, I still turn to these super easy, quick wins that are still equivalent to cooking at home and staying small. Along those lines, cooking, at least in my book, does not mean that you have to use heat. If using fire really scares you, if you're worried about burning something, or you just don't want to deal with that element, then start really, really simple. Make salads or sandwiches and really kind of hone that skill of what flavors go together, what things do you like mixing, kind of experiment, play around with that. You can make some really, really amazing salads and sandwiches all on their own and pack those for lunch when we're allowed to go back to work, or make those for dinner as just something really, really easy to whip up when you don't feel like dealing with the stove. It's a great way to start figuring out how to work with food, and from there you can scale up and then start to use heat. Another way to make cooking simpler when you're just learning is to start off with vegetables and carbs and leave meat out of the equation. Meat is just a little bit harder. You have to worry about precise cooking temperatures so that you don't undercook something. And then you also have to worry about sanitation when it comes to dealing with raw meat, especially with raw chicken, to make sure that you're handling it properly and don't put yourself at risk for a foodborne illness. Vegetables and carbs are just a little bit simpler. If you undercook your vegetables, you're just gonna end up with slightly harder vegetables. If you undercook your pasta, for example, you're just gonna end up with slightly more al dente pasta. So there's just a wider room for error with your vegetables and carbs where you can kind of play around with it and really figure out how to cook those properly. and then you want to go to the store and get some pre-made rotisserie chicken, or I know since we're in the middle of the pandemic, you can buy frozen chicken or other kinds of frozen meat and fish that are already pre-made that you can just heat up. Pair that with your homemade vegetables and carbs, whichever one you like, rice, pasta, all those sorts of things. And then as you get more comfortable in the kitchen, then you can start adding in the raw meat and fish. My next tip is to find recipes that are meant for beginners, that are easy, that are simple, that probably don't use too many ingredients, and that don't take too much time to put together. So when I was teaching myself how to cook, part of what I did was that I turned to Rachel Ray's 30-minute meals. So this is just an example. I'm sure there are plenty of other shows and creators out there like this. But the thing that I liked about it is because she actually had to cook it in 30 minutes, nothing was sped up or cut, then she was sort of forced to use really simple techniques. You can only get so complicated when you only have 30 minutes to cook something. Also, because of the time constraint, it meant that a lot of her recipes actually used the same kinds of cooking techniques. So you could easily master one recipe and then expand outward to a bunch of other recipes that use different ingredients but still relied on very, very similar cooking methods. So it allowed you to expand your repertoire pretty quickly, play around with a bunch of different ingredients and get comfortable with those, but not have to completely teach yourself a whole new way of cooking. Along with finding recipes, you also want to look for sources in general that aim to help beginners learn how to cook. There's a lot of cooking and food content out there, but to be honest, I found that a lot of it tends to be food porn. Am I allowed to say porn on YouTube? A lot of it is really more meant for entertainment rather than to educate you. Either it's because they speed through things so quickly that you kind of don't really know what's going on and you can't really follow along with it, or it's just so elaborate that you can't really recreate it at home, or it would just be way too complicated and you're more watching it just out of entertainment's sake. But there are some really, really great resources out there that are aimed for beginners. I didn't have YouTube when I was first learning how to cook, and this is a really, really great place to start. Obviously with my channel, but there are of course a bunch of other creators out there who are really, really trying to break down recipes and teach beginners how to walk through their recipes step by step. Something that I really, really liked about learning from Rachel Ray is that because she didn't speed through anything, if I wasn't sure how to chop an onion, I could just watch that part really slowly and watch exactly how she did it and replicate that. And of course now there are a bunch of YouTube videos out there on how to chop an onion or how to chop anything or how to cook a specific ingredient, so you can turn to those really easily. If you're not really into video, there are also some great bloggers out there who take pictures of their step-by-step process so that you can compare what you're doing to the photo and make sure that you're following along correctly. And that really is the beauty of these videos and blogs. You can cook alongside these recipe creators and pause the video if you're watching a video and make sure that you are doing what they're doing and that things look right at each step, so that you can make sure you're just not, getting confused and losing your way, and that you can end up with a final product that's going to taste just as great as I'm sure theirs does. I am going to link some resources that I turn to a lot in the description down below just to get you started, but this is definitely not going to cover the huge array of resources that are out there. Another great way to learn how to cook is to phone a friend. Do you know someone who is really, really good at cooking, or at least seems to really know what they're doing in the kitchen? Take this opportunity to reach out to them and ask them to help answer some questions that you might have, maybe teach you some of the basics, or how did they learn how to cook, or just to help you out in general. This could be a parent, or your grandparents, or a favorite aunt, or an uncle, or a friend, or even someone that you haven't talked to in a long time. I know that this is a little bit harder to do in the middle of a pandemic, but luckily we also live in a time where there are some really, really great video tools. And this could be a good opportunity to reach out to someone that you haven't talked to in a while. Maybe like an old friend from long ago who you've seen post a lot on Facebook about the amazing food that they make. Maybe this is an opportunity to reach out, or a family member that you don't really get to touch base with too often. This is a really great time to check in with them, see how they're doing, make sure that we don't all feel alone right now, and then also maybe build up this skill and have something to connect about. Learning can sometimes be so much easier when you're not doing it by yourself, so find those people that you can lean on and that you can turn to for questions and advice. Alternatively, if you don't know someone who's like a huge cooking whiz, you could also find someone to learn how to cook with. So again, this could be over video conferencing. If you live alone and you have a friend who's been wanting to figure out how to cook, you could video conference each other as you figure things out and kind of make it like a really fun activity for the both of you and to keep each other company that way through this time. Or if you have a partner that you live with or a roommate and you both don't know how to cook, then this can be a great activity for you both to do during this time as well. It can be so helpful to have someone else there to bounce ideas off of, to ask questions with, to figure things out together. And I feel pretty comfortable cooking now, and so does Ike, but I know that when we cook together, we feel stronger than when we cook apart. So it's always much more fun to cook with a group and to have someone there to do this with. In general, I would encourage you to really try to not see cooking as a chore. The moment that you think of it as something that you have to do, you're going to be like, do I have to? But if you start to see it as something fun that you can do, you're going to be more excited to do it. For me, cooking is very much a creative outlet. When I used to work in an office all day, I used to look forward to coming home and just kind of cooking some dinner, unwinding from the day, and making something really delicious. And I still think it's so fun to have all these ingredients that I can play around with, try out new recipes, and make something really fun. We're also in the age of mindfulness right now, and this idea that we should really try to be present with what they're doing. And cooking really requires you to do that. You need to be paying attention and focused so that you don't burn something or cut yourself or mess something up in some way. So cooking is a great way to be present with yourself, with your partner, with your friends, with your children. A really great way to kind of enjoy a moment away from screens and away from just all of this sort of noise around us all the time, and just making something really delicious and wholesome that will nourish you, but that'll also kind of bring you together with your family and with your friends. And I think cooking is so powerful in that way. So really try to not see it as just something that you have to do because you're being told to do it. Try to find some way to enjoy it as well. I've shared a lot of ideas today, but part of the process of learning anything new is understanding how you learn and what's the best way that you can learn something in the most fun way. Are you a really visual learner and you really want to see things like played out right in front of you, and therefore should you go more towards video and YouTube and all those different resources out there? Or do you really not like that as much and you prefer to just read something, and therefore should you go more towards blogs and articles? Or do you prefer to just learn by yourself? Do you like just figuring things out on your own and not having anyone around to watch you make any sorts of mistakes? Or are you a person who really kind of needs a social element to your learning, where you want to be in a group setting and in a dynamic where you're going to be able to bounce ideas off of someone else and figure things out together so that you don't feel like you're in it alone? All of these are really important to figure out so that you know which tips are going to be the most helpful to you, and so that you know how to approach learning how to cook in the best way possible so that you can have the most success possible. My last tip for learning how to cook is to be kind to yourself. At the end of the day, you're teaching yourself a new skill here, and that's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take time and patience and practice, and you're going to make lots and lots of mistakes. I'm just gonna tell you that right now. I made so many mistakes when I was learning how to cook. I made so many things that I was just like, this doesn't taste great. I'm just really unhappy with this. Heck, I make mistakes still to this day. Yesterday, I made some granola and I just forgot some ingredients, and I guess I just made it in a different way than I normally do, and I tasted it after it came out and was like, wow, this is really not that great. I'm still gonna eat it, but I'm really not happy with it. So this happens all of the time, but I promise that over time, it's going to get easier. You're going to feel more comfortable. Just keep practicing, keep going at it. You're going to get there, and soon you're going to be making things that you are just so proud of and that you're just amazed with. So those are my 10 tips for how to start cooking when you don't know where to start. I really hope that this video is helpful for you. If you liked it, please give this video a thumbs up. It really does help support my channel, and it really does make a difference. Hit the subscribe button down below if you haven't subscribed already, and hit the little bell icon to be notified next time I post. And let me know if there's anything else that you're struggling with right now. I'd be happy to help. And I'll see you next time on Clockwork Kitchen. Bye for now.